Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, your Kings insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me, Sean Cunningham from ABC 10. What's going on, Sean? We got new digs.
Evidently, a lot is going on, James. Look at all this. Look, I got like a little nameplate here. Look at you got over there. I mean, geez, this is incredible. I don't know which way to point. I feel like a weatherman all of a sudden. Like you don't know where the high pressure's coming in from the Pacific. Somewhere over in this region.
Here in this region over here, see, I can't reach across and hit Sean.
It'd be great if you did.
Big shout out to Brennan Nunez from the King's Pulse podcast, who created this cool overlay. We're actually using StreamYard today. Hopefully it works out because this is our second run. We're trying to figure things out. It's a new platform for us. And so if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing all kinds of cool new stuff that we don't typically have. If you're just listening to the pod, either way, we're okay. Just make sure that wherever you're listening, you subscribe and you give us a thumbs up. The big thumbs up, the last couple of YouTube streams have gone extremely well. So we're very excited about the growth of the Kings Beat. And Sean, thanks for taking time out of your day because the Kings are just a dumpster fire.
Yes, they are.
It's like I should add a video clip of a dumpster on fire because that's what we're looking at on the court. But the San Francisco 49ers are not a dumpster fire, and that's where you've been the last couple of days is doing a bunch of Niners coverage, which I love. I mean, that was the greatest week of NFL football that I think in the history of the NFL.
So good, so incredible. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it's been well talked about at this point, but for all the incredible finishes, I still think I'm so much more just unbelievably captivated by the 49ers, how they continue to win, because they're literally inventing ways. It's like a total team effort in all 5 phases of the game. And what we witnessed at Lambeau Field on Saturday left me speechless. Like I was absolutely dumbfounded. Like I didn't think they were going to beat Dallas. I really didn't, but I could see the pathway there. They had no business winning this game, James, at Lambeau Field. I mean, the conditions the way they are. I know Aaron Rodgers is 0-3 going into that game in the postseason against the Niners, but they went in there, the way the defense was, the way Debo said, I mean, they couldn't really do anything offensively. And then the special teams, which has been so trash, comes through with not 1 block, but 2 blocks. And then you get a touchdown out of it. And it's like, what are we doing? How is this happening? And they're resilient. I mean, they rise above all these injuries. You got Debo hobbling off the field, but after the game, he's celebrating like he just won the championship. I mean, and now you go up against a team in the Rams, and I'm going to be fortunate enough to be down there to cover it. But yeah, it's just unbelievable. You've had ownage on them, and it's just really, really incredible to see.
Well, and I think that's a big thing. Make sure that you guys are tuning into ABC 10. Sean's doing incredible work over there. And we'll get back to this later in the day with the business of basketball, but you've got to go to amazing things throughout your career. And it's just, for me, watching as a Niners fan, it's been a wild ride to win in the snow like that. And you know what, Sean, I said, I think I've said this before, but like my son and I, we play fantasy football together now, and we're team rolling with Mahomes because we've had Patrick Mahomes for a couple of seasons, I think 4 years. Since he became a starter, like we've had him as our fantasy quarterback. And so we get decked out in our Mahomes jerseys and we sit here and watch. We're still 49er fans, but you got to pull for your guy. Every single moment of this weekend was just, it didn't even matter what team you were pulling for. It was just nuts. It was so much fun to watch. And, the back and forth in that final game, it really felt like the 4th of July. It was just like a grand finale of grand finales, teeing off one of the greatest weekends that, again, I think we've ever seen in pro sports. Just one thing after another after another. And, Sean, I think it's setting up for a really, really good AFC championship, NFC championship. And again, I hope people tune in to watch what you got going over on it at ABC 10.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and who knows? It's a unusual circumstance because I don't want to get too far ahead, but I mean, if they advance to the Super Bowl, you've got two straight games in SoFi Stadium in LA. I mean, it's really incredible. Like, it's not like they've got to go to Miami like back in 2020. So yeah, it's going to be pretty fun, and the only thing that could make this time worse is if the Kings like pulled off an unbelievable trade or something that could just totally disrupt the coverage. And I shouldn't jinx it, but I'm almost expecting something like that to happen.
Yeah, I would expect it them to totally try to. Well, actually, it would be classic Kings to wait until the start of the game and then dump like one of their better players for in a deal that everyone was just angry and bitter over. And so you would
Yeah,
have like this crazy dynamic on social media where people are trashing the Kings while cheering on the 49ers at the same time. I could see that happening, Sean.
yeah.
I wouldn't put anything past him. Okay, so some big shout outs again. Huge thank you to Brendan Nunes. Like, we dig the new layout. And again, if you're not watching on YouTube, it just got fancy.
It
That's
did.
all. Yeah. So we went all full fancy. Also, big shout out to Jim over at Brick House Industries for my Kings Beat gear, and Sean's got his on. It's on its way, Sean. I'm going to make sure that gets to you quick. I know it's already been produced, and we should have a merch shop here anytime.
Wow,
Make
we got merch.
Yeah, we got merch. Make sure that you subscribe to the King's Beat. Give us a premium subscription if you can, because we're about to go into another happy hour here in the next coming weeks, and you don't want to miss that. It should be a whole lot of fun. We'll have another guest. We'll do some crazy stuff. We might push it back until after the trade deadline, just because I think we're all expecting this to be crazy and chaotic, and the last thing we want to do is try to plan an event while not being able to plan an event, basically. But outside of that, Sean, we've got some crazy stuff going on with the Sacramento Kings, and I wrote about this on Sunday, and it's probably time that we just start the show with Tuesday overreactions. I sprung that on you. See that, Sean?
You did.
I
You
sprung
did.
it on you because
I
I
wasn't
knew
ready.
that you weren't going to be ready at all.
No, I'm not ready for anything right now. I'm still just taking it all in. I'm looking at all our fancy little logos and decorations, and I feel like
Yeah.
the kid who just saw a Christmas tree for the first time.
That's amazing.
Or I mean, that's so PG. I could have taken that so many different ways, but I went with the Christmas tree.
All right. There you go. We'll just
Yep.
leave it at the Christmas
That's
tree,
all
Sean.
we need. The Christmas tree.
Yeah, so Tuesday overreactions. It's one of our new sort of branded ideas that we're throwing at you. And I think it makes sense because I wrote about this on Sunday. The Sacramento Kings, at some point you have to shift gears in who and what you can be during a season. And typically it's not 48 games into the season, but sometimes it is. I mean, we've seen this before, this dance, this act. The Kings are now 18-30. And at 18-30, you really shouldn't be trying for the 10 seed. You should be trying to fix your roster moving forward. And to me, Sean, that means maybe not getting trying to get dragged into the Ben Simmons sweepstakes, which is just the biggest disaster of a shit show that I've ever seen. Pardon my English.
Let it fly, buddy. Let it fly.
It is. It is just like the worst of the worst thing that just keeps coming back. And as soon as the news cycle dies down, they dive right back into the news cycle. Oh, look, NFL is over. Let's hit the ground running on Monday and throw out that Tyrese Haliburton and a pair of first round picks is what we're looking for now. Sean, at 18-30 though, you're bad. You're bad. This is
Very
a bad
bad.
team.
Yeah.
And bad teams with veteran players, this is a time that you start selling. You start selling your veteran players. Is there a moment here where am I overreacting? Should the Kings just be going out and looking for young players that are injured, maybe young players that a team isn't using, or some first round picks? Is it time for the Kings to truly shop their veterans, not for some mystical giant deal that may never materialize, but for future assets?
I would say those are actually two different questions the way I look at it. Because is it an overreaction based off where the record is, based off of where you are from a competitive standpoint? Like I said this last week. I said, James, this season be damned. The season doesn't matter. But I also feel like, and I equated it to when they got Ron Artest. Like when Ron Artest came in and they made a push, and it was like you made such a franchise altering move that it coincided with success and pushed you into the playoffs. So two things can be true. I don't think it's to a point where you totally like. I don't care about the season, but you can make a deal that you're setting up for yourself long term that does impact success this season. So that can be true. But to your point about getting younger, like I don't think this team is situated to get very much younger, if that makes sense. Like for example, I think if you're doing a lot of that, and I think you stop short of saying this, like with the picks and gathering assets and whatever. I feel like they're in a sense where they have to avoid doing the hard reset. And, Monty has gone on public as saying that they don't want to do the hard reset. And the hard reset, I think, can be defined several different ways. And let's just take it on the face where it's we don't want to get rid of De'Aaron Fox or Tyrese Haliburton. We would rather not. We would like to see a path forward with those two players. You already have a slew of picks that you have already. You own all of your picks. If you're getting more picks, in my opinion, you're doing so with hopefully the ability, either at the trade deadline, draft, offseason, what have you, to be able to unload some of these picks so that you can acquire a relevant, in their prime, budding star, maybe already a star, maybe whatever, but you need to use those assets. We don't want to see those assets drafted in Sacramento. And get younger, because to me, I don't think that this fan base and this organization can really stomach it. So is it an overreaction? I think it could be in the sense of the season, because I still think that there's going to be, a lot of these moves I think are going to be moves that possibly we don't hear about, that we're not expecting, because really anything can happen between now and the 10th. But I do feel that right now the overreaction is really going young and punting and trying to gather all these acquisitions without having the ability to move them. Because I do see a lot of people saying, well, look at what the Grizzlies did. They should just punt everything and go with what they have with Fox and Haliburton, and then just get younger and bite the bullet and go with those 2 or 3 years, James.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of routes you can go right here, but I think waiting and hoping for some miracle to save this season is like fool's gold. Like at this point, to me,
Yeah,
you're
the
3
season
games,
be damned.
Yeah, you're 3 games out of the 10 seed, and you're 3.5 games out of last place. Like, at what point do you just go, man, last place sure does look really, really intriguing to me, And that means like taking a huge step back, putting veterans on the bench or trading veterans, and just going raw and trying to get there, trying to be competitive, but knowing that you're going to lose most of your games, even if that is giving De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Haliburton like carte blanche to do whatever they want in the final 30-something games of the season, but surrounding them with Chimezie Metu, Robert
Right.
Woodard, Jemias Ramsey, Lou King, Nemias Queta. I think that there's a way to do this that makes sense for the Kings. Like, again, I'm looking at the Chicago Bulls and saying, man, would Chicago consider trading, I don't know, Patrick Williams and Derek Jones Jr., who's expiring, for Harrison Barnes?
That's a name, by the way, that keeps coming up, isn't it? Derek Jones Jr.
Yeah. Well, he has for a while. So,
Yeah.
But would the Kings consider making a move like that? Would Chicago consider making a move like that, where you're getting a younger player, but a younger player that's hurt, who's not going to be impactful for the Bulls this season, but it really does set you up with a versatile player that you can use next season, the season after, who's young, who does, play defense and sort of fit what you're trying to do. So those are the deals that I'm looking at. I would, the same thing with Rashawn Holmes, same thing with Buddy Hield. There comes a point where the big deal just doesn't look like it's going to happen. And then maybe it will, but
Right.
I'm not going to sit here and wait around and watch this season completely implode unless there's a reason behind it. and the reason would be like, call it a reset, don't call it a reset. I don't care what you want to call it. But at some point, you got to do something different than what you're doing right now. And Sean, the biggest thing that I'll point to is last season, this team walked into the year and they were trash. Like, as far as outside of like a 6-man rotation, I did not think that they had the talent to compete, right? I think we've talked about that many times.
Right.
That team was 22-26 at the same point. That team was 4 games better than this team. I mean, that's just shameful that this team is this bad, Sean. Like, the losses to Houston and Detroit, those 2 losses right there are so inexcusable. But they also, there's a huge difference between being 8 games out of the playoff picture. I mean, at 8 games under 500 and 12 games under 500, which is the difference in those 2. So it's an issue in my book. And I would like to see the Kings be more aggressive and try to do something different than what I think they're doing right now, which is sort of scurry and try to make this big deal that makes some sort of magical sense that I don't think we're going to see materialize.
Well, and to that point, James, I really wonder about Monty McNair. Because if you get to a point where you're just like, all right, pack it in, implode, sell off, look, everyone's available, we know that. What if one of those guys getting out of town is Rashawn Holmes and it coincides with first-round pick, nothing too sexy in return? That's a guy that you just re-upped, and that's on Monty's watch. Now, granted, he didn't sign Buddy Hield. He didn't sign Harrison Barnes. So moving those pieces makes sense. But I just wonder if there's going to be the patience, can they stomach something like that and look at Monty and say, okay, Monty, like, you haven't really done a whole lot in terms of rebuilding this team, revamping this team since you've been here. There are circumstances certainly involved there. I don't want to even use the term excuses because I think they're circumstances. But will they afford him the ability to do something like that? And that's a question I don't have an answer to. And if I was to use my gut, I'd almost say no.
Isn't that at what point do you do what's best for you and what's best for the franchise? That's the hardest thing. Like, we're talking about.
Yeah, because they're all culpable. Like, again, we've talked about this for several times, where it's like it's Monty McNair and Wes Wilcox are in what I like to refer to in the retail world as middle management, because you have people who are still approvers above them, and it's not unique to Sacramento. But again, if you're really putting pressure on those people to get the job done, right? Okay, that's fine. But the people who have to greenlight deals, that certainly they brought deals to them that were shot down, and vice versa. The Kings have shot down plenty of deals because there's so many people that think they're operating out of desperation and they'll take a bad deal just to save face, And again, James, if we get to that point, like these are weeks that I would imagine are entirely stressful for those two gentlemen and everybody that are in the front office, but particularly them, because they're kind of the figureheads for it. But I mean, you've put all your eggs in really 1 or 2 baskets for the most part, and I think, look, I like to say this a lot, and it comes off as patting ourselves on the back, but if you listen to this podcast regularly, you pick up on some things, and fortunately, as I've always said, that the option is to be right. The purpose for what we're doing and reporting and what we say is to be right, not to speculate. You can speculate all you want, but we don't like to just throw a bunch of BS out there, right? Yeah. And some of the things that in conversations that we've had and things of that, like I said weeks ago that I don't see Ben. I think they're going to keep him. I could be wrong, but that's what my gut tells me. And we talked about the James Harden situation weeks ago. We talked about Dame Lillard weeks ago. James Harden, I mean, you saw what the piece that Sam Amick and Shams Charania from The Athletic did, is exactly what we were talking about just weeks ago. And seeing it almost come to fruition is in a way a line in the sand from Philly to say, hey guys, we don't have to make a deal. This is kind of the ultimate end game here, but we're a very competitive team. You see what Daryl Morey said on the radio in Philly about maybe trying to help this push because they are surging right now. So yeah, it's this odd dynamic, but it sends a message to other teams that are saying, like, if you think that this is a terrible deal, do you become desperate as more and more as the February deadline nears? And I think what those pieces show is that Philly, even though they've got this big fish that everyone possibly would want, that certainly doesn't want anything to do with them, that they're showing that they don't have the desperation, that they're not desperate necessarily to move him based off the team's success, and that there is an end game at the end of the season should they want to get that far.
Okay, so first of all, like when we get done with this, is Daryl Morey going to have a friend in the league? Because at this
I
point,
think so. I don't think it's that bad. Do you?
I don't. I do.
It's business.
It's
business.
I get it. It's business, but he's the one feeding this beast every single day. He is the one who is throwing out these proposed trades that he's thrown at somebody or that have been discussed. Yeah, we want De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Haliburton for Ben Simmons. Yeah, we'll pass. A trade was discussed that included De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Haliburton. That's what's going on here. It's like a never-ending battle to and the Kings are losing the press battle. And
which by the way I think is fine, to be honest. Like, again, the way people absorb and digest that information, however it gets out there, like, yeah, there's a squeaky wheel out there. They have to be squeaky. Like, he has to be. It's Daryl Morey. He's got a championship team with a player making a boatload of money that doesn't want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Like, the Kings, again, the Kings don't want to operate out of desperation. Like, yeah, if you can land Ben Simmons, great, but you're not going to, like, cut yourself off at the feet to do so, right? Like, so I think there's... I don't mind that. Like, you mentioned something, I think, in the last podcast that resonated with me, which was talking about how, a difference between saying everyone's available and putting a name out there, right?
Yeah.
Well, of course, people. But you're talking about how the audience and the consumer reacts to that. The NBA does not, like, these front offices. They cannot, and should not be impacted by that. Like, they don't operate the same as the way fans and media do, in the sense that the way they consume the information. So just because you say to a league, to GMs, that everyone's available, and then you call and say, hey, some of our pieces that might be really available, well, are in reality because they're your most attractive products, right? You think of like a grocery store, right? Your top shelf is where your best stuff is, and all the crap at the bottom is the stuff no one really wants. That's why it's easiest to reach. So, like, when you put a name to it, of course that's what that means. But yes, the consumer who aggregates this stuff or reads all this stuff, they go, oh, Harrison Barnes, oh, Rashawn Holmes, whatever. Yeah, they're still on a really pretty shitty team right now. So, of course, they're going to probably be those assets that leave. So, the way the consumer digests this information is different. That doesn't mean it's clicking. That doesn't mean, by the way, that Rashawn Holmes is any more closer to being traded to Orlando, Brooklyn, or Boston or Philly. All it means is that there's a yard sign on the front yard of the Sacramento Kings, and everything can go, but it's not everything must go.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? It's almost like they're having a yard sale, but then you look in the garage. When you go to a yard sale and you're like, well, is that for sale? And they're like, no, that's just part of the garage. It's like, well, why is it sitting right there?
There's a joke there too, because it could be an estate sale. Did someone die?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the way GMs look at Sacramento, as if someone freaking died and that everything just, like, come and get it.
Yeah, I really do feel like, though, they're in, like, the worst possible position. Like, Monty McNair, Wes Wilcox, they're in the worst possible position. They are literally working the phones 24/7. I know they are. I know that they've got, not only are they working the phones, but, Joe Dumars is working the phones. Everyone there is, Ken Catanella is working the phones. Everyone is working the phones trying to make this team better. That doesn't mean that anything is going to work out in the end. And if this is the team that goes down, like the final, whatever, we're at 34 games remaining at this point, if this is a team that spirals out of control and just gets bombarded, I expect major changes. But that's so hard that you're like, how do you walk the tightrope of doing what's best for you as a general manager to keep your job, and doing what's best for the franchise long term. And I think that there is a moment where, maybe you can take Harrison Barnes and attach a first round pick and go get a better version of Harrison Barnes. Maybe you can do the same thing with Rashawn Holmes or with Buddy Hield. I don't know that that's the case anymore. I think at this point, you need to start looking, you need to broaden your horizons about what you're trying to do here, because this core just doesn't work at all. And, it doesn't matter what pieces you put around the outside, unless you can start getting elite pieces around them, then this isn't going to work. So you have to start thinking about like how to manage this situation differently. And, if I'm the Kings, I'm pretty frustrated with the way that I'm being portrayed in the media as a team that is desperate, but also that every single thing includes them. And it's just, at this point, it's
That's what
so
they want.
easy.
That's what they want.
I guess, but is it?
Yeah,
Because
because all the options that are out there, like, be attached to everything. Like, I understand the philosophy, but I don't think, like, it could come across to some people as desperate, sure, but you're desperate to want to improve. I think there's that, but I don't think there's a desperation that like yeah, you can be in, like, it just shows that you're doing your due diligence, like, to like be involved. It doesn't
but
mean you're making some of these deals.
how do you manage that and your locker room? Because it's not like these deals don't involve Kings players.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Well,
it's
and a
that's the
lot of
tough
them
thing,
too,
right?
James. Like, you have to understand too. I mean, this, but for people who are listening, like,
Yeah.
so many of this stuff come from agents. There's a lot of stuff that is just agencies put out some pretty odd information.
Yeah.
Especially, like, one way of saying, I don't want my client to basically demand a trade, because that would be awful, but I can leak his name into a trade scenario that can work. And that's often why you don't really hear me put a lot and you too, for that matter, we don't like to put a lot of, trade scenarios that we've heard. I think trade rumors, I know fans love them. I think they're just nonsensical. I saw someone the other day put out send me all these trade scenarios that you would do with different teams. It's like, well, who gives a damn? Like, it's like, at the end of the day, it's just like fantasy football, right? You're just kind of like, okay, what like, it's interesting. I guess I think there's like kind of like a, that's why they created GM mode on like NBA 2K and on these video game stuff. Like, there is a fascination and something that's kind of fun that comes from it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really mean anything unless it actually happens. And that's why it's great to hear that, look, everyone's available. That means you don't just put that in the media. You go to the locker room and you say that. And these players know they suck. This team sucks. They know they're going to make it. They're going to try everything they can to make it better. What I would hope that they would do is have individual discussions with all of them, and say, get feedback with, say, try and figure out what's working. Like, you have to have those one-on-one discussions. A lot has happened this season. Like, there's so much. I mean, this isn't necessarily the Malone season where you've had 3 head coaches, but you've had a lot happen this year. Like, it's been a grind, and it does take its toll. And you do have like, even though you can make the sarcastic joke that, this season could be done, and the competitive nature of this team hasn't been there for better part of the season. These are still professional athletes, and when you're saying, hey, you're 3 games from a postseason whatever, I mean, you could be 10 games. These athletes will want to go out and they still feel like they can make up that ground with however much. The reality of it is it's not that likely, especially with a team that's sucked. So you have to be really honest with people. These are humans, as we've talked about, and you have to be really honest and look them in the eye and say, if I can get better, I'm going to get better, and I'm going to handle it the right way. What you don't want is to see a guy get traded, not have any communication from the front office, have that Billy Bean Moneyball approach where it's like, thanks for your time, see you later, and you hopefully they handle things in a more human manner.
Yeah, I'm hoping that that's the case as well. I'm just looking at the schedule, and coming up, they on Tuesday evening, Celtics. Wednesday, we got the Hawks. Later this week, you got the 76ers, the Knicks, the Nets, and the Warriors when you return home. And this thing started with the Bucks, but the problem that you have is that the Kings went into the road trip with back-to-back losses at home to 2 of the worst teams in the league. So now we're looking at a 3-game losing streak. this thing could hit 10 real quick. Like you could, or at least it could hit 9 really quick. This team could also win a couple of games, but at the end of the day, winning a couple of games is not enough. Like when you're 12 games under 500, they'll be lucky if they don't return. Well, I mean, over the next 6 games, they could go 18 games under 500, but there's a good chance that they're at least 14, 16. I mean, that's just disastrous, Sean. There's no
Yeah.
recovering from that. And not only that, but like what we talked about, look at last season's roster, looking at this season's roster, that's not like horrible. It's pathetic. It's pathetic that you're in this situation, that you put yourself in this situation where, like, if you don't pick up a win against the Celtics, if you don't win on the road or the Hawks on the road, that you're probably going to lose so many games in a row that, that you won't have any fans at all. I feel like this is just, it's become such a weird season to cover. And, and again, I think the distraction of the 49ers is a good thing for Northern California fans.
Yeah, unless you're like a Bengals fan. Well, I mean, I guess it would be fine if you're a Raiders fan, it probably sucks because you're like, all right, what about my Kings? Oh, they're not there either. Okay.
Yeah, well, big shout out to Ryan Lillis over at the B. I know he's the biggest Buffalo Bills fan ever, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel for you, dude. You get a shout out on the pod because we know you're a Bills fan, and that was hard. Okay, so Sean,
by the way, real quick, I mean
Yeah.
this road trip, which is interesting because since we're talking trades and what they have to do, like I think it's a really interesting trade and something to note. Like obviously everyone's on this trip. Like you've got a lot of ownership on this trip at various portions. You've got
they brought all 4 of the young
everybody,
guys.
and look at the opponents. Like I could see a trade with every single team that they play on this road trip. Like there's trades to be had, and I guess you could say that really, James, at any portion. But I feel like of all the road trips that they have, Celtics, Hawks, Philly, Knicks, even Milwaukee, who they started off with, every one of those are like
Even the Warriors. You don't think the Warriors could use Rashawn Holmes? You don't think they have a young player and a contract that the Kings could take on and figure out a way to get Rashawn Holmes to Golden State? And I mean, how good would he look there? Like, man, the only team that I kind of circle is the Nets. And then I guess it's like, okay, well, why don't you just package everybody up and a bunch of first round picks and go steal James Harden just to be spiteful, and then lose him in free agency.
the one that I keep kicking around is like, why wouldn't they trade Kyrie?
Yeah, but I mean, like if you're the Kings, I wouldn't touch him. But if you're Philly, like I don't know.
Kyrie and Embiid could be pretty freaking good.
No, I
That'd
think
be
you're
fun
right.
to watch.
Yeah. And here's another thing that I'll bring up with regards to, and I've said this before, but there seems to be some weird, just guarantee that you can trade Ben Simmons for James Harden this summer, or that you can trade Ben Simmons for Damian Lillard this summer, or Bradley Beal. There's this overconfidence and ego thing that once you completely destroy a 25-year-old's value and then watch him sit out an entire year, and the last time anyone saw him, he had an epic meltdown on the court, which is why your head coach and 2 leaders on the squad called him out in person in post game. How do you expect that he's just still has his value?
Mm-hmm.
How do we know that he even loves the game of basketball after this is all said and done? How do we know that the Players Association isn't going to file a major grievance against the Philadelphia 76ers for their handling of the Ben Simmons situation, who last time I checked, he's out basically on what amounts to in the real world as stress leave. You get paid for stress leave. He's going to get paid. Once this thing gets arbitrated, he's going to get paid. This is a mental health issue. At least that's what they've put forth from his camp. And then that even adds, you're taking on a 25 going on, he'll be 26 by the time this thing's all said and done.
He could be 30.
Yeah, he could. Well, he could be 28. I know that because he's under contract for another 3 years. But like they've overplayed their hand on like really it's on a really bad hand. That's what it amounts to. Like they are bluffing beyond bluffing with like a pair of tens. Like that's what this is at this point. You don't have anything. Like you have nothing. And
Well,
you're
and
just
I think it helps so much that they're, so competitive. Like the team is, I don't want to say gotten better, but they're certainly trending the right way, right? Like Embiid is incredible. Is just unbelievable. He's really
well, but he's
those guys
5 minutes away from being out for 10 games.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, he does it every year. So, I mean, he is incredible. But at the same time, like, I don't know. Did you see someone put out the stats, like, just how good Embiid has been?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why don't you look at Jokic
wait
stats?
for it? Are you just waiting for? Oh no, Jokic. Yeah, Jokic. That's
Jokic is better in every single statistical category except for points per game.
But I mean, look at just the difference from previous seasons with Embiid. Like Jokic was an MVP last year, so like it's we've seen it. Like we know what we're getting with the Joker. But with Embiid, and even though he's a great talent, but the other thing is, James. I mean, look that team, which is I keep going back to this. Everybody in the East right now. 1 through 6, you're talking 2.5 games differential from number 1 to 6, and that's outside of the play-in tournament. That's not 7, 8, 9, 10. It's really a fascinating year, and shout out the Heat because they're sitting atop the Eastern Conference and
quietly,
and they're doing it with guys that, again, I mean, gosh, that organization. I think everybody should sign up for a tutorial on how to build a franchise because it's like the Heat and the Warriors do it 2 different ways, and both of them are equally entertaining.
Yeah, I think the Heat, and then San Antonio. I mean, San Antonio is like the gold standard, and I know they've fallen on hard times, but that doesn't mean that they won't make the playoffs again. I mean, they're right there. The Kings are a half game above the Spurs and could easily slip below the Spurs. And then you're looking at, like, you got to jump over 3 teams just to get to the 10th seed. I mean, if that doesn't tell you how bad your season is gone, I don't know what does. Sean, let's skip to a different topic. We're having this weird injury with De'Aaron Fox where he just magically couldn't go on Sunday. I don't know what's going on there.
There's a lot of speculation that day. Speculation was running rampant.
Yeah, I checked in and they said he just got to he tried to warm up and all of a sudden he had something going on with his ankle and he couldn't go. Still questionable going into Tuesday night's game. That seems strange to me that something popped up out of nowhere that wasn't on any injury report. Chimezie Metu is doubtful. And I think Damian Jones has also got an ankle injury, which I think I remember seeing him come down funny on someone's foot and keep playing through it. But it brings us to this issue that every single time that De'Aaron Fox doesn't play, Tyrese Haliburton puts up 20 and 10. Like, I don't know why we can't get these two going at the same time. But even if you look at what was it, the game before where the Kings lost, but Terence Davis had 35 and De'Aaron Fox had 29.
Yeah, the Detroit game.
Yeah. So you had those two figure out how to score in the same game. But why can't Fox and Haliburton do that together? Is it because Ty cares too much about, or he shows too much reverence to De'Aaron Fox and Terence Davis he doesn't care about those things. He's just going to go score. I mean, is there something that you think that would impinge on this group to these two players to be the guys going forward?
Yeah, it's a fun conversation to have because I didn't pay it much attention early on until Fox went out with COVID because obviously you needed to see Haliburton play in a different kind of setup, differently than what we've seen him. And I talked about Fox's struggles at nauseum, and I still think the majority of it comes down to if he's standing in a corner, that's not what you want. So having the ball out of his hands, is a thing we talked about at nauseum. But I I think there's still an adjustment period, partially because I think really they need to look at themselves as being a selfish basketball player. Like, I know when you're the two playmakers on the team, you're trying to get everybody involved, but De'Aaron's talked about it. He said, I'm looked more as a scorer these days, and he talks in reverence about Haliburton being the best passer he's ever played with, and obviously he's an elite playmaker. So there is, there's so many things to like, but Tyrese has to understand that just because you're an elite playmaker doesn't mean you can't score the ball and shoot the ball, and there should be a baseline, a number you have to reach every single game in attempts. And the one thing I'll say is with Fox out, I think we had a couple episodes ago we talked about who's the player that, I forget how we phrased it, but my answer was De'Aaron Fox. I think extended
the most
absences,
irreplaceable player.
Yeah, and to me it was Fox because usually when he's out, you don't see these games where people score, and there's a lot of scoring that needs to be picked up. And this last game against Milwaukee, albeit against it was actually kind of a fun game, to be honest, to see three guys score 20 points and to see Tyrese be one of them, all the while being the lead playmaker, kind of showed you something. Now, it could be just a glimmer. I'd like to see, like, for example, if Fox doesn't play against the Celtics, I really want to see what that looks like. I may not, because they could go get their teeth kicked in, but it's not like the Celtics are this world beater, but I do want to see another game, especially in a series of games. Maybe it's 2 out of 3, whatever. I want to see if they can duplicate that, because it's a game where Harrison Barnes, again, he's the biggest conundrum there is. This guy has to score. So going back to what you asked, I don't know if I'm really there yet as to why they can't have these. And again, I was the same guy. If you rewind several, decade ago, there was that speculation. Why can't Tyreke Evans and Kevin Martin have good games together? Mm-hmm. And they were in interesting spots in their career. Kevin, it's almost comparable to this. As obviously, Kevin Martin wasn't a playmaker, but he was certainly a guy who was able to get to the free throw line and score and put up numbers. But what I'm getting at is the fact that both of them, if you have Kevin Martin is to De'Aaron Fox in terms of the years of experience, and Tyreke Evans is to Haliburton in terms of the new kid on the block, and both of them are ball handlers and playmakers and trying to be this guy who initiates the offense. And obviously Tyreke was more of a scorer, but it is this dynamic where I thought too much was too made about that. Like, I didn't think that they were incapable of playing well together and having big games. Like, I'll take it a step further, James. We don't often see, maybe even the past 2 seasons, like, how come Buddy Hield and De'Aaron Fox can't both be like 25-point scorers consistently? Like, right in that neighborhood.
That does happen on occasion. And
on occasion.
Other people do score 20 when Fox scores. You know, it's just not all the time. And I think the biggest difference between the Kevin Martin, Tyreke Evans situation and the De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Haliburton, Jesus.
There you go. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, the biggest difference is in the first game back, Fox went to Haliburton in shoot-around drills, in layup lines, and said,
shoot the ball.
Keep doing what you were doing. Keep doing it. Do not stop what you're doing. And that lasted for like 2 games, and then Haliburton went right back to who he was before. Mm-hmm. With Kevin Martin didn't want to give up who he was on that team. He wanted to be the guy, and the team wanted Tyreke to be the guy, and you had this moment of, like, the personalities clashed. I don't think Fox and Haliburton are ever going to clash. I think that they are friends. I think they spend enough quality time together. I think that there's a connection between, like, girlfriends and fiancés type stuff where they hang out as couples. I think we saw that in the offseason. I think that there's enough there where they can coexist together in the right situation. But the teammates around them have to be different, because this isn't what's happening right now. It's not working. I need more Terence Davises. Or I might even need more Chimezie Metus, who doesn't care, except for I need a better version that actually hits the shots. And that's not a dig on Chimezie as much as it is, like, this team, De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Haliburton, they have to understand that the reason why Chimezie Metu is open to take wide open shots 8 times in the first quarter is because the opponent left him open. That's the guy the opponent wants taking the shots. And that's where this team, the IQ of this team, is so frustrating, whether those two are on the court or not. And it's not that you freeze a guy out, but I think it's on coaches and it's on players to put guys in different positions to succeed. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want Chimezie Metu out there, uh, you know, at the top of the key in that surrounding area. I want him in the corner. I want Harrison Barnes up there. I want, even if it's Marvin Bagley, I want to see
Right.
different players shooting those shots. What I don't want is to see, a guy like, basically it's the equivalent of Jason Thompson. Jason Thompson always kept saying, like, I'm waiting for that moment where I'm shooting 12 shots or more per game. It's like, bro, good luck finding that in Turkey.
It's so crazy, James, because you want to see unselfish basketball. You want to see the ball move and just be in this fluidity, right? And fast pace and all that stuff. We get that. But these players have to have the mindset of, while that is nice, and especially we're talking two playmakers in Fox and Haliburton, while that is nice and that is the ultimate goal, when you come to some of those players, Davis, Metu, there's probably another guy in there I could throw in.
Damian Jones.
Right. Like, these guys recognize that the ball's moved, it's come to me, I can make a play right now. But they need to understand, no, you want to bring it back around, get it back to Fox, get it back to Haliburton, whatever, get it back to Harrison Barnes or Bagley, these guys that you can rely on. They have to be able to hit that metric of these guys are putting up enough shots. These guys are leading to your most success. These are your higher efficient players. And even Buddy, like, it's crazy to me to see last year, and it really started last year was when I noticed, is like, you can bring in a guy like Terence Davis and he's like, I'll shoot all day. I'm going to come into this circumstance. I'm going to come into this situation and I'm going to shoot all day. And that's why I asked Luke Walton at the time, how big of a green light does he have? And he did it because nobody else would shoot the ball. And it didn't seem like I think Luke was bothered, not necessarily bothered by it. I think if he had his pick of the litter, obviously it wouldn't be what he wanted, but he wanted the other guys to notice, like, yeah, you've got a guy off the bench who's ready to go. And he's looking for that opportunity, and you need to be just as aggressive. You need to meet that same type of mindset. So I think there was a little bit of like trial by fire there, to where it's like, if you're seeing Terence Davis going out there and shooting 17 times a game, like, first of all, what? On a team like that they had last year. And then you come into this season, you would hope to see that Tyrese Haliburton is looking to have the same type of fire to do that. The Milwaukee game, and I wondered if it was just a game where all of a sudden he's back in his hometown, near his hometown, and having some of these moments, but it's not like he's a guy that takes people off the dribble. You know what I mean? So he does have to kind of rely on being an open shot, but he has tried to get into the paint, and that little sidestep three, James, that's fun to watch. I'd like to see some more of it.
Yeah, I'd like to see a lot more of that, and to be honest with you, I'd like to see a lot more Terence Davis. I'm of the opinion now that give me as much Terence Davis as you can handle. Like, there are games where he makes mistakes and things like that, but even over his I think it's the last 4 games, he's averaging like 1.2 turnovers per game.
Right,
3 of them
it's
came
down.
in one game, and they were bad turnovers. They weren't fun to watch. But the dude's averaging 22 points a game over his last 4, shooting 41.9% from 3. He's shooting 9 threes a game.
Right.
Like, give me more of that guy, because I think we get into this this sort of idea with him that he is like a complete mistake player. And the fact is, when he's in rhythm and he's hitting his shots, he's really good. Like, and he's only 24 years old, and he's a guy that can grow into something more. He's under contract for another year. And to be honest with you, I just, like, the Kings are in this mode where you got to play players so you can show that they have trade value still. They're still part of your rotation. I still got to put Buddy Hield out there, but what I can't have is Buddy Hield going 0 for 2 one game and 2 of 11 the next game, because that doesn't help you either. Like, at that point, just sit him. Like, that's fine. Let
Right.
someone else that gives you a better chance to win the game play. And maybe he doesn't garner the same type of respect from the perimeter. He will if you give him a good 20-game run where he's either starting or playing, 28 minutes off the bench, because he's going to keep shooting and he's going to keep hitting. He's a very good shooter, and, sometimes it's erratic, sometimes it's crazy, but at the same time, I'm kind of tired of, oh, we got to play this guy because that guy might get traded between now and February 10th. It's like,
The only thing with Davis, like he's playing. I love these last 4 games. Really, I truly do. I think these last 4 games are a nice little glimmer. I'd love to see it sustained, but I can't help but remember, that those 8 games stretch from November to December where he was really bad. He did have 4 games where the scoring was up in that stretch, but the most encouraging sign, whether he's scoring or not, is that the turnovers have to stay down. And some of the things he does, it can be maddening. But I don't fault him for going out there and trying to get his. Like that's a role that he needs to play. And this is a team, James, that we talked about, like going from that streak in December, specifically towards the end of December, where the scoring on this team was just gone. Like where was it? That would have been an amazing opportunity for him, and him being back, I think, has coincided with some bigger scoring nights. I think it's great. Obviously, they're not winning, but it would be there. I do see it, and I do see the 4 games there where I like. This is something that he needs to build off of in a major way. I just don't know that you can rely on him with any sort of consistency. But but you're right. I mean, right now he's looking like he could be that guy to fill a Buddy Hield role should Buddy Hield be traded.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I can't depend on Buddy Hield to do anything at this point.
Well, then there's a whole nother Not with this team.
Yeah. So my point would be that if I can't depend on Terence Davis, like you can't make the argument that I can keep depending on Buddy Hield, because I can't. So as a starter this season, in 10 games as a starter, Terence Davis is averaging 26.7 minutes. 18.7 points, 5.3 rebounds, 1.8 assists. His true shooting is 61.9%, field goal percentage 49.3. The more minutes you get him, the better he plays, which is interesting. Of course, most players, they're like that. But again, if you look at the 3 games this season he's played, over 30 minutes a game, he's averaging 24.7, 6.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists. The 7 games he's playing over 20 minutes, he's averaging 17.6 points, 5.1 rebounds. Like, the more minutes you give him, the better he is. His three-point shooting has gone up. I think early in the season, he just got off to a bad shooting start, which I think everyone...
Yeah, he couldn't buy a bucket.
Everyone was
lost
confused, too. They were totally confused because he had a tremendous camp where he was hitting everything. Yeah. And then they went away from him so quick. They scrapped the idea of the 3-guard set so quick because they were getting, punched in the face and losing the rebound battle every single night. But at this point, I think all bets are off. Like, no one is playing well enough that they deserve any specific type of minutes on this team. And then you have some guys who are stepping up and saying, like, maybe 1 or 2 guys are saying, like, look, I want to play and I want to win, and that to me is Terrence, and that's Ty. Again, like, De'Aaron Fox was out and you shot 14 times. That's not enough, Ty. You're in front of your 500 people there that you brought in from Oshkosh. They came to watch you put up your career night. Go get your career night. It's fine. Everyone's fine. Like, everyone expected the Kings to lose that game. The fact that they only lost by 6 was, like, really good. But still, like, that is one of those nights where you're just hoping that he comes out of his shell a little bit more and scores a little bit more and stuff like that. So, all right, Sean, I think it's time.
Oh,
it's time to get to the business of basketball.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, we've been thinking about this. I mentioned this to Sean. We were texting. Was it last night or was it this morning?
Oh, these days are just
they do kind of like
together.
Run it together. I sent so I don't know if everyone watches Ozark. If you don't watch Ozark, you should watch Ozark. Ozark's amazing, right?
By the way, little sidetrack there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know how this final season is broken up into 2 parts?
Yep.
Okay, so have you watched the first 7?
Oh, of course. I binge watched them the first day.
Yeah.
They're gone.
No spoilers here. Not going to say any spoilers.
Yeah.
But I had heard...
They all die!
Yeah, everyone. I had heard how it's and I'm always thinking Sopranos when I'm because they broke up that one season into two pieces, and it seemed like there was a year and a half in between the two parts. This one was like, oh, maybe they'll be in the summer, maybe in the fall, and I saw Jason Bateman on Kimmel, and he's like, no, it's going to be sooner than you think. Like, it could be in the spring. It could be like literally next month. And I think part of it was because they're worried about leaks with the plot. And
Yeah.
I don't know, like this Netflix thing is kind of fun and interesting, and kind of hearing him talk about it on some of these shows. Like you mentioned Ozark, man, I'm just right there. And people, it's weird. I know several people who absolutely hate the show, and I just don't get it. I don't understand why they hate it, because
I can't
I am all
understand it
in.
either.
There are
Yeah.
there are some cringy moments and some corniness and some plot lines that you can pick apart. I'm there, especially this season, by the way. But I'm right there. Like, it is thoroughly entertaining. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's intense. Like the whole time
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh, I got to watch this." So anyway, there was a meme that was put out on social media last night, and so I sent it to Sean late at night because I knew Sean would appreciate it greatly. And let me see if I can actually find it, Sean. Um, oh yeah, it's this. I'm gonna show it.
Yep.
It says, "Gonna tell my kids this is Ruth from Ozark."
Yep. Shout out JT.
And of course that's Justin Timberlake.
The top ramen hair. By the way, Julia Garner is fantastic in that show.
Oh,
And if,
yeah.
And if I can give you a movie that she's in, The Assistant from like, I don't know, like a year or two ago, is kind of an interesting watch. She's really good in that.
I think I've seen it, but like I'd have to see the cover. Like it's funny. Like I worked at a video store for a year when I was
Same.
young.
We have that in common.
Yeah, and so I can tell you like what every movie box looks like. That's how my brain works. Like I can shuffle through them in my head. So I have a difficult time when people say, "Hey, did you watch this?" And I go, probably, but let me see what like the Netflix picture looks like or the Amazon Prime picture." And then it's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I watched that." I can't remember names anymore, but outside of that, like the way the brain works, the index works, like I just shift through. Okay, Sean, let's get back to
Ozark
the business of basketball. I don't know how it got on Oz. It's my bad. It's like, oh, because Sean and I were texting back and forth last night. It started with the JT pick, which is spectacular, and then we went back and forth. Sean and I have both had the opportunity to go cover plenty of things that were not Kings related. And for me, it's mainly, local, not local, Northern California NFL teams, baseball teams, stuff like that, golf tournaments, stuff like that. But Sean, it brings me to the question, in all your years, what is the greatest non-Kings assignment that you've ever been on, where you got to go see something? And I mean, I assume you've seen a couple of Super Bowls, which I have not seen Super Bowls, but what is the greatest thing that you've got to go cover?
Yeah. And it's so, because I have covered a lot of those things, and we've talked about it: Super Bowl, NBA Finals, Stanley Cup playoffs, finals, World Series. I've done all of those, and I did all of those one time in a span of 2 years, which was like really incredible to think about. Like when you think about how the Super Bowl was in Santa Clara, but they were calling San Francisco home. And then you had the Warriors in the finals, you had the Sharks in the Stanley Cup finals, and you had the Giants in the World Series. Like all that coincided. I was like, this is unbelievable. And a lot of those, for me being a lifelong Giants fan, I always go back to the Giants World Series, but I wanted to take it a different step because I felt particularly cool covering UFC 207, James. And I was doing this story on a UFC fighter named Cody Garbrandt, who made this. He lives and trains in Sacramento. Not from here. He's from Uricksville, Ohio. And a kid back in his hometown was a cancer survivor. And he was introduced to him by some friends at this gym and from his hometown. And he says, look, I'm going to make a pact with you. And he says, if you beat cancer and stick around and keep doing your treatments and all these things, and if you get in remission, I will let you walk me to the octagon in a championship fight. and he would give it. He said, "If I ever win a championship, I will give you the belt." And not only did that happen, James, which is, I mean, such a cool sentimental moment. This guy can articulate it so well. He wrote a book on it. I've got it sitting up there. It's called The Pact, if you want to read it. But I was there in December 30th of 2016 in Las Vegas, and it's a championship fight against Dominic Cruz, who, if you know anything about the UFC, Dominic Cruz has owned Team Alpha Male. Excuse me. And like, you know, his battles with Uriah Faber, you know, Faber beat him before it went WEC, before it became UFC. And, but Dom had some ownage on Team Alpha Male, and Cody went in there, toyed with Dom, destroyed him, won the belt. The kid had walked him to the octagon and gave him the belt right there. And just the access, you know, having all that stuff, it was that to me was the best non-King story I did, because it was like this continuing coverage of this one fighter and all the cool stories that everybody could relate to, and then to see it happen on a pay-per-view card in a huge event like that in Vegas and have access to all those guys, that to me was probably the best non-Kings singular event that I haven't talked about, because we've talked so much about Super Bowl, World Series, NBA Finals, you know, the world, all that stuff. And then, you know, I just thought the magnitude of that moment, and just sitting back afterwards and going, wow, this is really cool, because I mean, it was so incredible. It was a storybook. It was like something out of a movie. And to see all that kind of culminate and just have the access that we did, because again, it's like, you know, it's special when you have one of those relationships with one of the athletes where you've done a story with them, they remember you, you have that relationship, you've culminated that relationship, and you can see it through all the way to the end, to its peak. It's like going to the Super Bowl in 2020 in Miami, when we've got so many local 49ers with local ties, not only in Eric Armstead, but even Ahkello Witherspoon, and finding that moment that Ahkello Witherspoon, who was on the 49ers at the time, sharing the same trainer as Jennifer Lopez, and Jennifer Lopez is performing at the halftime event with Shakira, and we get to go watch Ahkello train, meet his trainer in Miami, who also is working out A-Rod and J-Lo right in front of us, and we're the only ones in this building. So we're in this tiny gym. It's Alex Rodriguez, it's Jennifer Lopez, it's Ahkello Witherspoon, Ahkello wasn't there, it was his dad, and then Lena, myself, and Dodd Romero, his trainer. And it's like, we're in this little studio, and there's 20 paparazzi outside waiting for J-Lo to go out. Every time I go through the door, it's like, it's not her. Like, no shit, it's not her. It's just so big. It was, you know, it's one of those incredible moments where you just look around and go, what is this? What are we doing?
Okay, so see, this is why we do the business of basketball. Sean has so many stories that, I mean, none of the, like, you would have never thought to tell those stories if it wasn't for that. You know, and I'll say, like, when it comes to like my great stories, it's mainly basketball. Like I've got to go cover finals and been in crazy places. You know, I'd say this, like, walking into a Major League Baseball locker room was like the craziest thing for me, because I've always been such a huge baseball fan. And then realizing that every single player is so yoked that you're like, what? Because we're used to like tall stream beans. And then there's always like one or two dudes, you know, your Aaron Aflalos, who are like stacked. Yeah, Aaron Aflalo would be like maybe as big as Jed Lowry on the A's. Like everyone else in there, I mean, you're like literally forearms are like this big around. I remember looking at Josh Fegley, the A's backup catcher, and his legs were like his calves were like much bigger than my head. Like his calves were so huge, I didn't even know how he moved around. It was crazy to look at. But
and baseball's the fun one too, because when you walk in there, you do see a lot of that. But then you also see like, oh, there's Bartolo Colon, who, how are you a professional athlete?
Yeah, how are you?
And it's, you know, it's like, looks like me over there, and I'm just like, hey, hey, what's up, big sexy? What's going on?
Yeah, but there's not that many of those guys as much as there are like these dudes that you're just like in like shock that all they do is work out, like literally all day. And we're not used to that with NBA players. The NBA players work out, but it's totally different. Like if you played football, you know that the basketball players don't work as hard as the football players. And, you know, usually the baseball players don't work as hard as the football players either. But to see that, it was like, huh. And then I'll say this: like walking on the field for a Raiders game, I'm not a Raiders fan at all, but seeing Mark Davis in person is an experience. I mean,
What do you mean?
the the bowl cut doesn't look any better in person, but the fact that he wears like when you were in junior high, well, if you were in junior high in the 80s like I was, like some of the cool kids had white jeans.
I,
That dude
I wore
like
white jeans.
he no, you don't wear white jeans.
I did. I did.
You wore white jeans. Okay, so
Not like all the time, but there was a phase where it was like for a year or two, you had to have them on. You did like a once a week.
yeah, you thought you were cool. Well,
Yeah,
I lived in an
I did
area
it.
where kids who had white jeans, that lasted all of like 2 days because there's red dirt everywhere, and like your white jeans don't stay white. So anyway, my Mark Davis standing there like in pregame, like waiting for the national anthem, wearing his white jeans. Like everything about him says like 1983.
It's so great. It's
Yeah,
so great.
he got
Especially if
locked
the
in
wind
like,
catches the bangs. It's even better. It's so
man,
great.
I don't know. So I'll end with this as my favorite story was going to Toronto for the NBA Finals, and Toronto, number one, is just an unbelievable city. It was a couple of years ago. Now in California, you can walk the streets and smell pot. But in Toronto, it was like socially acceptable long before it was here. Sort of like Portland, maybe a little bit. Like I walked by a construction site and there's a dude with an orange vest and like a stop sign, like routing traffic, who is literally smoking out like right there on the job. It's everywhere. But outside of that, just like to see the fan base be so excited.
Yeah.
We I was there twice within a week, and actually I was supposed to go home to Golden State and then fly back the next day to go back for a third time. Why does that not make sense? I think, yeah, like well, yes. Anyway, I stayed my first couple of days. I stayed in like a pretty nice hotel, but it wasn't outstanding, and it was maybe a mile away from the stadium. The second time I went, I was on like the 55th floor with this view of the entire bay, which is unbelievable. Toronto is an
I was so
incredibly,
jealous.
yeah, it's such a beautiful city. Looking down, I could see where the Blue Jays play. Their stadium's right there. When they started doing like their rallies the night before, people are marching through the streets. You could still hear them 50 something stories up because of the sound going up. What's Jimmy
Eat
Goldstein?
World? Oh.
No,
Yeah,
what?
Jimmy Goldstein. Yeah.
Yeah, Jimmy Goldstein.
The super fan.
I bumped into Jimmy Goldstein. He was lost on the streets. I had to walk him like maybe 8 blocks to the NBA trailer to try to get his media pass because I think he gets a media, or at least he gets a pass to go in early. He's the
He's
older
my
gentleman
hero.
that
Love that guy.
yeah, he can be your hero. I can understand that. But if you ever see a Lakers game, he's the one wearing the black hat and like the
And he hates the Lakers.
really.
Yeah, that's the fun part. He roots against the Lakers all the time. He's more of a Clipper fan, but he's he's the insane looking guy. Get up with the big hat, old man, very fashionista. Made a lot of money in fashion, real estate, parking lots. He's still a bit of a mystery. His house was in the Big Lebowski. I mean, they use it for photo
Oh,
shoots all the time. Yeah,
all right.
it's called the Sheets Goldstein Estate. If you want to look that up online, it is unbelievable. And the guy has an incredible story. And I will say this, James, he does, for some people, he could probably be a little jarring or a little frightening to see. I've interviewed him several times. Every time I see him, I try to at least say hello. But I will never forget the first time that, and mind you, he's probably 12 years older now. I think the first time I ever talked to him, but I didn't expect him to sound the way he does. And it caught me a little off guard, and I'm not going to impersonate him, but if you ever just go look up an interview with him or something to see if you can find the way he sounds, because he probably sounds the way he should look, or he probably sounds the way he looks. But for me, I didn't expect that noise to come from him, and I literally kind of like kind of jumped back a bit. I was startled.
He's 82. I just looked it up,
Yeah.
and every single time you see him, he's with a
Yep.
supermodel with longer legs. Like,
Yes. He
yeah,
loves his tennis and he loves his NBA and he
yeah,
loves
yeah.
his supermodels.
His supermodels. Yeah, he's an interesting cat. Anyway, I ended up walking him like quite a ways. Like I had to like help him out and hung out with him and led him to the trailer, and then brought him in. I'm like, hey, I've got Jimmy Goldstein. What do you guys want to do? And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, come on in, come on in, and they took care of him. Yeah, just I know like being out in front of their arena. There was a father and son that had been there for 3 days waiting to get in to get into Jurassic Park, like the area that surrounds the arena, which they let maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 people into. And they were having concerts out there and all this crazy stuff. But then it's all locked up, so fans were watching on these giant screens. And then they duplicated that all over the country, so they had these scenes in other cities around where people were showing up and to watch the game. I was in Vancouver one time when the Canucks were in the Stanley Cup Finals, I believe, and that was pretty crazy. I don't watch
Mm.
hockey at all. We just happened to be there, and we saw this in Canada another time where like thousands and thousands of people are in have like basically blocked off city squares and are watching on like these big screens that they put up, these big projection screens. But the father and son in Canada, um, the Raptors actually sent someone out at the last second and said, "Hey, you guys have been here for 3 days. We've got." It was those two and the two people that came next. They're like, "We got some seats inside for you," and they brought
That's
him
so
in.
cool.
Yeah, and so like these, but I had interviewed him a couple of times, and you wave to them every time they come through. Jerome Williams like went and hung out with that crowd for a while. Junkyard Dog. Yeah, so that was probably my best. Being and the Warriors didn't win there. They lost. I was there when Kevin Durant blew his Achilles. The fans cheered. That was ugly. Uh, Kyle Lowry got on the mic and yelled at their fans to stop.
Hmm.
And then, but I was in the Lakers and the Warriors and the Cavs locker rooms during championships where they won. Like,
Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories like that, and it's great. It's great to be able to, I meet so many people. Like, I'm in a very privileged position because there's so many different sports that I can have access to, and I get a kick out of people who might be, for example, Sam Amick. He grew up a big Giants fan. He's a Niners fan. I had lunch with him just yesterday, and hilarious that how much he was engaged with the 49ers, and he's kind of an outsider to it. So it's great to see because he's, covers the NBA so hard and so regularly. So when he gets a moment to be at an NBA game and, you know, there's Jimmy Garoppolo at a Warriors game or George Kittle at a Warriors, he gets a kind of a kick out of it. And it's fun to kind of see those moments. And I'm sure if he had a moment to where he could branch off and go do a Giants game really quickly, he'd love to do it.
yeah, it's weird. We have to check our fandom at the door, but
Right.
you're still allowed to be fans
Right.
of other things. But everything else, you got to kind of put it to the side. And so to have those moments where you do get to like enjoy, like I thoroughly enjoyed this weekend of football. Like I
Oh,
enjoyed all four games. I enjoyed all of it. I enjoyed all of the memes aimed at Aaron Rodgers.
they
I
were
enjoyed.
harsh, man. Those were pretty harsh. I mean, it was. I get it. I get it. I did find joy out of it, but I was also like, wow. Maybe just how quickly things have changed when it comes to Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean he still has his State Farm commercials. I don't know how long that lasts, but talk about a guy who probably walked away from a career, in broadcasting after this. I guess he could possibly still go do Jeopardy. I don't think so. Yeah, interesting stuff. So,
Yeah.
all right, Sean, I think that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I do. How
Uh-oh.
about a prediction? Because we don't usually do this.
Oh,
But like, will the Kings when we reconvene on? I think we're going to record Thursday probably. I'm trying to look at the schedule here. Tuesday, yeah, because they're off on Thursday. So
Tuesday, Wednesday, back to back.
will
right?
they be 0-3 on this road trip, or do they get one? I think they're going to be 0-3.
No, I think at this point, like, I think that they're a little bit shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think,
Which
I
is
think
weird because they played pretty decently against Milwaukee. That second quarter was the detriment. But like there wasn't a moment where I thought there was a quit or a let up. I thought there was guys playing hard. But I still feel like they're going to be 0-3 by Thursday.
Well, I mean, but with this team, I wouldn't be shocked if they win two. Like, I'm looking at the Celtics, I'm looking at the Hawks, and I'm thinking neither of those teams are really playing well or really that good. But are they bad matchups? Probably. But, I
think Fox probably has to play, though.
Yeah.
If Fox doesn't play, I don't see a win.
Well, I think Fox played against Houston and played against
Detroit.
That
didn't go
so
well.
I'm not convinced that any one player or any one situation means that this team will win or lose. But you're up against it at this point. Like, you have to, on this trip, you got to find a way to split the next two games. You're going to lose the Sixers. You got to find a way to beat the Knicks somehow. And then, you're going to lose to the Nets. When you get back, you're probably going to lose to the Warriors. Like, that's not good. So we're talking maybe 2-4. Maybe, and I don't even know if we can predict that. It's pretty rough. It's pretty rough go. But this is what happens when a team decides to mail it in. So I think that's what we're seeing here with this team, unfortunately. All right, so let's just touch base on a couple of things. Make sure that you are subscribing to the Kings Beat on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up. It's a race to 1,000 subscriptions. That's what we're trying to get to.
Just
on
1,000, just
on
a G.
YouTube. Just a K.
Yeah.
Just 1K. That's what we're looking for. That's where we'll start. Number 2, Kings Beat. The newsletter / blog / website / whatever you want to call it. Make sure you give us a subscription there. If you can do a premium subscription, even better. And that way you'll get invited to the next happy hour.
Can't wait.
Happy hour. Big shout out to our friend Brendan Nunez for this cool look that we have.
Look at this.
Yeah, it's glorious, Sean.
Fancy.
It's glorious. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat Podcast. For ABC 10's Sean Cunningham, I am James Ham. Thanks for tuning in to the Kings Beat Podcast. We'll see you Thursday.